Welcome to the second season of Trophy Moments and a Few Firsts with me, Keith Baldwin. Sponsored by Spikes Trophies, where you can reach Spikes at gospikes.com or one of the 3 locations in the Delaware Valley. And my guest today is Richard Bliss. He's the CEO of Bliss Point Consulting. He's a public speaker. He's an author of Digital First Leadership, which I've read. And as I mentioned, he's our first remote guest. So first, welcome, Richard.
Keith, what a pleasure to be here and an honor to be your first virtual guest. I'm kind of touched. You've had some incredible guests on before, and so I'm feeling very privileged to be here.
Well, I'm privileged to have you. For my guests that aren't familiar with who Richard Bliss is, can you give me a little bit of a background of who Richard Bliss is? Where did you come from? How did you become a LinkedIn expert?
That's a big story. Let me condense it down. I have been in the past for nearly 20 years a chief marketing officer, software executive for a variety of software companies. I am a former military artillery officer. I am a father of 5 daughters. There's many things that make up who I am, but we can get into part of me being here just to tell this story about how I ended up here, because it's a very unique story. It shocks a lot of people when they hear it. But I found this, can we call it a calling? This opportunity that took a huge leap of faith to do, and then found myself in a place that I never thought I would be, enjoying a life that I never thought I would enjoy. And so that's kind of a little bit about my background and where I am today as the CEO of Bliss Point, a company. We are 5 years old. Focused on helping executives like yourself, sales teams. I work mostly with multinational technology companies. I'm based here in Silicon Valley. And so this gives people an idea of the influence that I'm able to have. And I've been named by LinkedIn as one of their top voices in the category of sales. I was ranked number 8 in the world on that, which came as a surprise to me, by the way. That just totally came as a surprise.
When did that award come?
That award came right after I started my business. It came out of the blue. Honestly, it came to me as an email from someone who I completely believed was a scam. And so doing my due diligence, they said, hey, you've been nominated as a LinkedIn Top Voices. Here's what this program is. And this was about 4 or 5 years ago. And so I went out and checked the guy out on LinkedIn and sent him a message on LinkedIn and said, no, wait, is this legit? Yes, it was. And then later that year, I was named as one of the top 10 in the world. And they picked the category of sales. And Keith, what's interesting, I didn't even consider myself in sales, but it named me Top Voices. I received this. If you look at my LinkedIn, you see I have nearly 120,000 followers on LinkedIn. Many of them came because of that recognition by LinkedIn. And so that's kind of, in some ways, from a business standpoint, how I ended up here. But I was already doing this before we got here.
So we met.
Yep.
Through the National Speakers Association, where you flew out and you gave a presentation to a meeting that I was at the NSA chapter of Philadelphia.
I think it was your first meeting, wasn't it?
It was not my first meeting. It was close to my first meeting, though.
Yeah.
First time meeting you. And
Yep.
I was taken back by your presentation and actually won a bid to spend time with you. And you were very influential in what I'm doing on LinkedIn. And I've shared it with a number of people. And so tell us what you're doing with your consulting business.
Sure.
With LinkedIn.
So LinkedIn is what I call the upside down world of social media, if we're Stranger Things fans. As the upside down world, it means that everything we do on LinkedIn is completely opposite of everything we do on other social media platforms. And the things we do on other social media platforms like TikTok, Instagram, Facebook actually sabotage our efforts to be successful on LinkedIn. And this is something that you and I have talked about. Mm-hmm. And the reason has to do with money. And it has to do with where the money comes from. Willie Sutton, if we're familiar with a little bit of history, is a famous bank robber who was asked, why do you rob banks? And his answer was, because that's where the money is.
Money is.
And why should you be on LinkedIn? Because that's where the money is. Your customers are on LinkedIn. But it even goes beyond that. And that is Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, these social media platforms, their algorithms are designed to extract as much of our attention to generate revenue for their customers who aren't us. We are not their customers. We're the product. So their algorithms are designed to spread our content, keep us there as long as possible, distract us, enrage us, and those very things. But LinkedIn has come out very clearly and said, look, that's not our goal. Partly is because their revenue doesn't come from advertising. Their revenue comes from subscriptions. 80% of their revenue, $11 billion, comes from us paying for LinkedIn Premium, LinkedIn Sales Navigator, LinkedIn Recruiter. Some of my clients spend more than $1 million a year on these tools. That means we all, if we're paying for any one of those, are paying customers for the benefit. And if you don't pay for it, then you benefit still, just kind of like your kids do when they have the Netflix account and they move out of the house, although that has changed. And so one of the key things here is that understanding how the algorithm operates so fundamentally different, and the outcome that it's trying to drive is the key element. What I presented to you and to the group, and you and I have had these discussions, it dramatically changes the way we think about our behavior and activity on LinkedIn. And this is one of the biggest aha moments that my audience goes through. I have heard audible gasps from the room. I was in a room the other day with about 600 individuals as I stood on the main stage, and they almost cry out in shock when they start to realize that most of what they've been doing on LinkedIn has not only not succeeded, but has been penalized because they're following the wrong model of outcome. LinkedIn has specifically said, we do not want your content to go viral, which sounds completely odd for a social media platform. But that's this unlearning that I do, and then helping individuals and organizations figure out, okay, now you just taught us what we're doing wrong. What should we do now to maximize our impact on this platform? And so that kind of gives you an idea of it.
Your book helps us do that. So your book, go ahead.
Yep. No, go ahead.
Saying the book.
What about my book?
No, I read it and I thought that there was a lot of great tools in that book, which is digital first leadership.
A little bit of the origin story of how I ended up where I was is that I discovered that the things I had gone through to learn about social media was something that most executives that I worked with also needed to learn. And so I was able to spend some time working with them, which led to this moment. And I wrote the book about that experience, helping executives learn about that. And so that's been one of the key things in the book, is to help people, because Keith, you already know this as well. Oftentimes you now meet people online long before you meet them in person. I mean, I did a presentation in Raleigh just past week, and there were people in that room who had worked together for years and had never met each other in person. No longer is our physical presence what drives relationships in today's world. It is our digital presence that comes first, and then our physical presence follows. And that is a huge switch for many leaders who grew up in a world of handshakes, backslapping, right? And it's
so
like,
older
okay.
people like me is what you're
I wasn't going to say
about.
that. I wasn't.
Yes, it is dramatically different. I'm used to, as you said, handshakes first, one-on-ones, meeting them, not digitally.
No.
So it was a change for me in my mindset. So you're this guru now, and you're an author, and you've got many big clients that you consult.
Yep.
How did you get there?
I was the chief marketing officer for an international software company. I had spoken in 22 different countries. I was traveling the world. I had appeared on CNN multiple times. I was the face of my particular industry. It was a niche industry, but I was the face of it. And so here I am, all over the world, talking, speaking, engaging as the chief marketing officer. And one day the founder calls me up, and he's talking to me, and I'm like, this is a weird call. And then I had to say, wait, am I being fired? Well, no, blah, blah, blah. And that went on for 20 minutes. And finally I said, look, if I hang up this phone, do I have a job? No. So you're firing me, right? Let's just be clear. He didn't want to say it. Yeah, you're firing me. And then they gave my job to my wife. which cause an incredible amount of awkwardness. Stress, awkwardness, because there's several layers here of this onion to unpeel. But let's start first of all with my professional identity. It was tied up in this industry, contacts, network, what I was known for, the company I represented. All that went away overnight, in a heartbeat, went away. And I couldn't tell people because our income at the time was tied to now my wife's job. And for those who are wondering, it is now my ex-wife. This was one of the things I think that probably contributed to some of that, but it was an awkward situation. And so I had to reinvent myself. And that reinvention involved finding a way to learn tools without damaging my professional credibility. So I started a podcast like you've done. It ran for nearly 10 years, 350 episodes. I wrote a book, not the one you've read, but I self-published, self-edited, self-wrote a book. It's terrible. There's spelling errors on the back cover. Do not do that. Right? I taught myself social media, Twitter. I ended up generating 25,000 Twitter followers on 2 different accounts because I picked an area. It happened to be board games. I'm well known in the board game area. My podcast was about board games. I picked a topic where I could learn and practice without embarrassing myself, if you know what I mean, right? I wasn't going to fall on my face in front of potential clients. And then one day, so the ex at the time, she wasn't happy. She's like, hey, go get a job. It wasn't as easy.
You're sitting here playing with this podcast.
I'm playing board game podcast. I'm playing. But what happened is that a colleague, a contact, found himself in a unique opportunity, and they needed to hire somebody with some very specific qualifications. Those qualifications were somebody needed to be able to write. They needed to be able to work with executives. This happened to be a deal with a $6 billion tech company. They had to be able to live in Silicon Valley. They had to be available immediately. And, they had to understand technology. And they had to do it for $800 a month. And they approached me and said, would you be interested in this? Now, for most of us, when we hear that, we'd be like, absolutely no.
Right.
But I've been in this industry a long time, and I recognized a door had been opened, even if it was the smallest crack of a door. And because the individual that I would have been working with, this executive, his name is Tom Mendoza. He was the former vice president and at the time, vice chairman of NetApp, a $6 billion company. And also, if you've ever attended University of Notre Dame, his name is on the side of the business school, the Mendoza College of Business. And so here was an opportunity for me to step in to a whole new role. I'm not the man on stage anymore. I'm not the guy out front. I am now going to be a shadow writer working with Tom to help him create content, his stories that he wanted to share on Forbes. Well, once I started doing that, then the general counsel of NetApp wanted my help, the head of sales, the partnership. Pretty soon, then the sales team is like, can you train us? And suddenly I found myself, they hired me on as a full-time employee. And that happened because I was willing to take a tiny risk. Well, it was a pretty big risk. And then take this new opportunity that I saw down the road that would turn into huge opportunities. And what happened is that after a while, about 5 years ago, through a series of circumstances, several CEOs came to me and said, Richard, you need to be doing this for yourself, not working for a company. And so I stepped out on my own. NetApp continues to be one of my biggest clients, as do a wide variety of recognizable tech companies inside of Silicon Valley and outside. And so that's where how I got here was I took a risk and stepped out blindly with the belief in myself, but the belief in that I could see something coming. Now, that belief was not shared by my spouse. And I mean, not that we want to go down a path, but one day she just announced that she was leaving, and it came as a shock to me. But again, something happens. What do they say? When one door closes, another door opens. And in that process, having been at NetApp, and as I struggled with divorce and changes, and my daughter happened to work at NetApp at the time, one of my 5 daughters, and one of my colleagues was very helpful through this process. And then one day I realized she and I had known each other for several years. And I realized, wait, I think this is the kind of person I've been looking for. And we just had our 5th wedding anniversary last Saturday. And so she met at NetApp. She and I met at NetApp as well. So there's my story, to find myself in a place I would never thought I would have been, at a level of satisfaction and happiness that I didn't think was possible, all because of a series of setbacks. We'll call them setbacks, that then I saw as an opportunity.
You got kicked in the gut. You got kicked out. And there's a lot of places people can take that. You took it in a dramatically different way. Instead of saying, oh, woe is me, and crawling up in a ball and going away, you took an opportunity. It was another door opened. And that is so important. It's attitude. You showed an incredible attitude to move forward in a very difficult time. And I don't want that to be lost on the audience. And you reinvented yourself out of something that was your passion, which is board games, and then you took a chance on yourself. It's very inspiring. That's one of the reasons why I wanted you on the program. So the title of the program is Trophy Moments and a Few Firsts. So I'm going to go in that direction right now and ask you, I know that you've done a lot, so what's your trophy moment of your life? And how did it affect you?
I've listened to some of your other guests, and there seems to be some common stories there. But when I was growing up, from kindergarten to the 6th grade, so basically from 5 years old to 12 years old, I attended 14 different schools. And I won't go into the details about it, but it had nothing to do with the military. 14
Oh, I thought it was military related. Okay.
Yeah, most people do, but no. It had nothing. In the 6th grade alone, I went to 6 different schools in 3 different states.
I can't imagine.
Well,
can't imagine.
Right? And when you talk about reinvention, at a very young age, as a survival skill, I've discovered that I had to reinvent myself sometimes every few months. Who am I? Right? One day I came home from school on the school bus. We were living in Minnesota. It was 6th grade, so the school year had just started. Got off the school bus, and my mom and stepdad at the time were waiting and it was a farm in Minnesota, and we said, hey, you need to go work the garden. Now, if you live on a farm in Minnesota, the garden is not a plot in the little backyard. It is pretty big. And I'm still in my school clothes. I'm like, what? So, okay. So my brother and I are down there working in the garden in our school clothes. We come back up, the car's packed up, and my mom says, get in. And we got in and drove from Minnesota to Washington State. And the next day, those people who had been my friends never saw me again. Poof, I was gone. Poof.
Wow.
And
I didn't know this part of their story.
No, a week later, well, this happened many times. And so the next week, I'm in a new school, in a new town, in a little tiny town south of Spokane in eastern Washington called Tico, which doesn't even have a stoplight. And now suddenly I'm the new kid. This is a place where there's no such thing as new kids. It's a farming community. Nobody moves to Tico.
And everybody knows everybody there.
And they've known each other. They've known each other since kindergarten.
Their whole life.
And I'm the new kid. And then a few weeks later, a couple months later, now I'm in Spokane going to school, and multiple schools there. And then a few months later, I'm 6 different schools. Boom, boom, boom. And I ended up in Olympia, Washington. Again, now it was April, so there's only like 2 months left of school. This bopping around, that was just the few months of the 6th grade, but it happened over and over growing up. It taught me skill sets. How to get in front of an audience, how to quickly identify and connect with people, how to read a room, how to understand, this is the key one, Keith, how to recognize there's no such thing as common knowledge. There's such a thing as local knowledge. Because as I moved from each one of these different places, I would get in trouble. In trouble is not the right word, but I would run into not understanding the situation, the local, something that everybody knew. But I didn't. And it wasn't because it was common, it was because it was local. And the difference between living in Minnesota or Idaho or Washington State or wherever, Alaska, or wherever I happen, a one-room cabin in Alaska, and that would have been the third grade, right? The rules changed, and I had to learn those rules as quickly as possible. Well, today, that allows me now to walk into a room, quickly identify, read the room, understand connections, make connections with people, memorize people's names. I can constantly am told how shocked people are, the fact that I can learn names. So my trophy moment really was the story I shared with you about reinventing myself on a level that I had never done before, even though I had done it, been pushed upon me. And in some ways, this was pushed upon me as well, right? A boss that fired me and an ex-wife that left me. That makes me sound terrible. I'm just going to say, we might want to scratch that part out of this. But the point is that, okay, now what are you going to do? And so in some ways, that story is that trophy moment. And yet it has followed me throughout my life. I spent a year in Taiwan learning Chinese and teaching English. I can say, 你好吗? 我是美国人，不说中文，听不懂，没有钱. Which I'm told by Chinese people is a really good accent, and they make laughs because it says, I'm an American, I don't speak Chinese, and I have no money. And they think that's the funniest thing. I think that's the funniest thing. So being able to constantly take risks, reinvent myself, but that reinvention, and then stepping out and starting my own business, for some people, it might be, well, that didn't sound that tough. But for me, it has been a transformational experience for me, a trophy moment that I can look back on with pride that I did that. And nobody can take that away from me.
The first answer like that I've ever received. So I appreciate your honesty in telling us that.
Yeah.
Wow. So now that you told me your trophy moment and all the firsts that you've done, which have got to be so many moving around that much, what's a first that you haven't done, something you've always wanted to do and haven't done yet? A first.
So let me, again, I'm trying to be sensitive to time, but I have a box, okay. and I wish I had it. It's packed away at the moment because we're doing some construction on the house. But I have a wooden box. It's a 3x5 card holder. That's a wooden box, and I've had it for decades. And inside that box is a series of 3x5 cards. And those 3x5 cards contain usually a single phrase. And it's a phrase what I call I don't even know what I call them, but it's me telling the universe what I want to do that I haven't done. And so I write them out.
Goals.
Goals? They're kind of goals, but
direction.
Yeah, but what I do is I stick them in the box and close the lid, and I don't look at them for a year or 2 or 5 or 10. It's not like I set the goal and then I plan, here's the plan. No, what I do is I create the image in my mind and say, this is what I want. I then put it in the box and I let the universe take care of it.
Do you tell other people about it?
Sometimes no. I do have lots of stories about telling other people about it and how it's happened. I ended up in Taiwan.
Give me one example.
I'll give you a couple. Here's one. I wanted to go to Taiwan. I was a young man, had no money, wanted to go to Taiwan. And one day ran into a friend, an acquaintance who was headed to Taiwan. And I happened to have a passport because I'd lived in South America. Now I'm in my early 20s. And I got a passport and I said, I want to go to Taiwan. And he's like, you're serious? I'm like, yeah, I'm serious. And so I happened to he said, I can get you a ticket for $660. I had $600 in my account, exactly. So I'm lacking $60. So I borrow it from my ex-girlfriend who felt bad for breaking up with me. This is becoming a theme, but the $60 then, I should have borrowed more because I took my $660, bought an airline ticket. On the way to the airport. So
you're going to Taiwan broke is what you're telling us.
With no money. And so on the way, my buddy is a pizza delivery guy, and he's taking me to the airport, a lifelong friend. So I take all the quarters out of his ashtray. He didn't smoke. So all the quarters out of his ashtray. And I had $10 in quarters in my pocket. Well, something I didn't know, you can't exchange coinage internationally. It's only paper. So on the airplane, now this has been quite a few years ago, they were selling the headsets for $3. So I bought the headset for $3 with quarters and got the flight attendant to give me change for the other $7. So now I got $3. The guy next to me, who taught me my first words of Chinese, because he's going to Taiwan, He gives me $3 more so I can have a $10 bill. I landed Taiwan. I ended up being there a year. And the story how I got there is dramatic because to get there from Seattle, I needed to get to Utah. So this was on a Monday. I run into my friend on Sunday. On Monday, I'm telling people I'm in Seattle, hey, I need to find a way to get to Utah. A guy in this little group I'm at says, hey, I've got a truck that I need to drive to Provo, Utah. I'll pay for gas money if you drive the truck. So the next day, he gives me gas money. I get in the truck and I start driving from from Seattle to Salt Lake City. On the way, I pick up a hitchhiker. A good idea, but hey, the hitchhikers
back in those days, we did that.
Right? We did that. So the hitchhiker's headed to Boise to see his girlfriend who owns a bar. If I take him to Boise, I'm going through Boise, he'll convince her to let me stay at their place that night. So we drive to Boise. I stay at their place. I get up the next morning, shower. I don't even see them, him and his girlfriend. I get in my truck. I drive to Provo. It's now, Monday, Tuesday. It's now Wednesday. Now I'm in Provo. I get my stuff, my bags, everything. So now I've got to get back to Seattle because the flight's in less than a week. Well, how am I going to get to Seattle? Well, I'm walking down the street in Provo, Utah, and I run into my best friend, the one who gave me the $10 in quarters. His parents from Seattle are walking down the street in Provo, Utah. I'm like, hey, what are you guys doing here? They're like, well, we're trying to find somebody to drive their son's pickup truck from Provo, Utah, back to Seattle. I said, if you pay me gas money, I'll do it. So they paid me gas money. I got in the pickup truck. There were some other adventures, but to cut the story short, I drove to Seattle, dropped off the pickup truck, stayed at my buddy's house, and then 2 days later, ended up on a flight to Taiwan. So when you talk about me putting these visions out there into the universe, I have more of these stories over and over. One of them, I opened up my box the other day and it says, I want to write for a major newspaper. That was one of my goals. But this was set decades ago when there were no such things as newspapers. And so what I ended up doing, though, is I wrote for Forbes.com. You can go out, Google my name, and see a variety of articles with the NFL. I got to work with Ronnie Lott, Roger Craig, the Broncos, the Seahawks, and write on Forbes for these individuals and with these individuals. And so I count that counts, right? I'm counting that.
Yep, I would count it.
Right? And so I'd
count it.
So let's go back to what I haven't done. One of them is, this is going to sound weird because of where we met, was to stand up and get a speech and have a certain amount of money paid for me to give a speech. Now, Keith, up until last week, and I'm not kidding here, I've never considered myself a professional speaker. And yet I have been on stage in 22 different countries, but it was always under my job. There's a big difference between my company hiring me or my
individually being hired
versus individually being hired to bring and speak on a particular topic. And I always wanted to do that. It's been my goal and dream. And I'd never really done it before. And so I wrote a number down and said, I want to deliver a speech and get paid this amount of money. And I stuck it in the box about 25 years ago. Last week, about a month ago, I was approached by an individual. And last week, they convinced me to launch a professional speaking business. And so now if you go to therichardbliss.com, all one word, therichardbliss.com, you will see that I have, under their encouragement, launched a professional speaking business, something I've always wanted to do but was afraid to do until somebody really pushed me. And my starting fee is that number that I wrote down on that 3x5 card 25 years ago. And so I really believe in this whole concept of manifestation. It has been exhibited in my life so many times. And so that's one of those things that I'm looking to be the first to actually have somebody pay me to come and stand in front of a group of people and influence them with my voice, my ideas, my thoughts, and actually get paid for it. And it's a kind of a unique experience. And I know probably you can relate to that as well.
Well, yeah, it's one of my goals, but I don't have a number to get paid for. But I have listened to you and speak to the NSA chapter. And whoever hires you will get more than what they're paying you. I can tell you that.
I appreciate that.
That is a great story. It's a great first. And I'm going to end with that because we're running out of time. And Richard, it's been an absolute pleasure listening to your stories and your firsts, and your trophy moments. And hopefully you've inspired somebody. I know you've inspired me along the way. Thank you, Richard.
Thanks, Keith. Thanks for having me here.
All right, take care, everybody.